As darkness settles over the forest and the last rays of sunlight fade beyond the horizon, a transformation begins. The world you thought you knew awakens into something entirely different. While most of us retreat indoors for the night, countless creatures are just beginning their day, stepping into a realm of shadow and moonlight where the rules of survival are written in whispers, clicks, and flashes of bioluminescent light. Welcome to Bedtime Biology, where science meets serenity. Each night, we explore the quiet wonders of the natural world, calming your mind and sparking your curiosity. Please like, subscribe, and comment below with where you're checking in from. Tonight, we venture into the secret lives of nocturnal animals, those mysterious beings who have evolved extraordinary adaptations to thrive when the sun goes down. From owls whose eyes occupy most of their skull, to bats navigating in absolute darkness using sound alone, to tiny primates with eyes larger than their brains, the night is filled with wonders that challenge everything we understand about the senses. These creatures don't just survive the darkness, they've mastered it, turning what seems like a disadvantage into their greatest strength. The architecture of darkness. Imagine for a moment what it would be like to see in near total darkness. Not the darkness of a dimly lit room, but the true darkness of a moonless night deep in the forest, where human eyes can barely distinguish shapes from shadows. For nocturnal animals, this isn't a limitation. It's their domain, a place where they hold every advantage. The secret to their success begins with their eyes, organs so specialized and finely tuned that they bear little resemblance to our own. When you look into the eyes of a cat at night and see that eerie green glow, you're witnessing one of nature's most elegant solutions to seeing in the dark. That glow comes from a structure called the tapetum lucidum, a reflective layer of tissue situated behind the retina. Think of it as a biological mirror, positioned perfectly to capture every photon of available light. Here's how it works. When light enters the eye, it passes through the lens and strikes the retina, where specialized cells called photoreceptors convert light into electrical signals that the brain interprets as vision. In diurnal animals like humans, any light that isn't absorbed by these photoreceptors on the first pass is simply lost, absorbed by the dark tissue behind the retina. But in nocturnal animals with a tapetum lucidum, that light gets a second chance. It bounces off the reflective layer and passes through the photoreceptors again, effectively doubling the eye's sensitivity to light. The tapetum lucidum isn't just a simple mirror, though. Its structure varies beautifully across different species, each variation optimized for that animal's specific needs. In cats, the tapetum lucidum contains crystals of zinc and protein that create that characteristic green or yellow eye shine. In raccoons, the tapetum produces more of an orange or golden glow. Alligators have a red tapetum, while some spiders have white or blue reflections. The color depends on the exact composition and structure of the crystals in the tapetum, which in turn affects which wavelengths of light are reflected most efficiently. But the tapetum lucidum is just the beginning. Look deeper into the structure of a nocturnal animal's eye, and you'll find another crucial adaptation in the retina itself. The retina contains two types of photoreceptor cells, rods and cones. Cones are responsible for color vision and work best in bright light, giving us the ability to see the full spectrum of colors in daylight. Rods, on the other hand, are exquisitely sensitive to light, but cannot distinguish colors. They're the cells that allow us to see in dim conditions, though everything appears in shades of grey. In human eyes, the ratio of rods to cones is about 20:1. In a raccoon's eye, that ratio shifts dramatically. In an owl's eye, it becomes almost extreme. Owls have approximately 30 rod cells for every cone cell, creating a retina that is essentially optimized for detecting even the faintest glimmer of light at the expense of color vision. This means that while an owl's world at night is likely painted in shades of grey and perhaps muted colors, it can detect movements and see details in lighting conditions that would leave a human completely blind. The structure of an owl's eyes deserves special attention because it represents one of the most extreme adaptations for nocturnal vision in the animal kingdom. If you were to see an owl's skull with the eyes removed, you'd be startled by how much space those eyes occupy. In fact, owl eyes can take up as much as 75% of the skull volume, compared to just 5% in humans. If human eyes were proportionally as large as an owl's, they would be the size of softballs. But here's something even more remarkable. Owl eyes aren't spherical like ours. They're tubular, shaped more like elongated cylinders, held in place by bony structures called sclerotic rings. This tubular shape allows for a very large lens positioned close to the retina, which maximizes the amount of light that can be gathered and focused. The lens can be enormous relative to the eye size, and because it's positioned close to the retina, it creates a very bright image on the photoreceptors. It's similar to the design principle behind a telescope, where a large objective lens or mirror gathers light and concentrates it for viewing. This extraordinary design comes with a trade-off though. Those tubular eyes cannot move in their sockets the way our spherical eyes can. An owl cannot roll its eyes to look to the side or track a moving object by moving its eyes alone. It must move its entire head, but nature has provided an elegant solution to this problem as well. Owls can rotate their heads up to 270 degrees in either direction, giving them a nearly complete view of their surroundings without needing to move their eyes at all. This incredible neck flexibility is made possible by several unique adaptations. While humans and most other mammals have 7 cervical vertebrae in their necks, owls have 14. These extra vertebrae are smaller and can rotate more freely, giving the neck extraordinary flexibility. Additionally, the way blood vessels are structured in an owl's neck prevents them from being pinched off when the head rotates. Owls have what scientists call slack in their blood vessels, extra loops and expansions in the arteries that supply blood to the brain, allowing the vessels to accommodate the twisting motion without cutting off blood flow. There are also small holes in the vertebrae that act as cushions, protecting the arteries during extreme neck rotation. It's an engineering marvel that allows an owl to maintain blood flow to its brain even when its head is turned almost completely backward. Now consider the great horned owl for a moment, one of North America's most formidable nocturnal predators. Its eyes are nearly the same size as human eyes, despite the bird weighing only about 3 pounds. Those massive eyes contain retinas packed with rod cells, giving the owl vision that is as much as 100 times more sensitive to light than human vision. On a night when you might struggle to see your hand in front of your face, a great horned owl can spot a mouse moving in the grass from over 100 feet away. But not all nocturnal animals rely on the tapetum lucidum. In the dense rainforests of Southeast Asia lives a tiny primate that has taken a completely different approach to seeing in the dark. The tarsier, one of the world's smallest primates, has eyes that are each larger than its brain. In fact, tarsiers hold the record for having the largest eyes relative to body size of any mammal. Each eye measures about 16 millimeters in diameter, which might not sound impressive until you consider that the entire animal is only about 4 to 6 inches long, not counting its tail. Unlike owls, raccoons, and most other nocturnal creatures, tarsiers lack a tapetum lucidum entirely. So how do they achieve their exceptional night vision? The answer lies in pure optical engineering. Their eyes are so enormous that they can capture vast amounts of light through sheer surface area alone. The large cornea and lens allow maximum light to enter the eye, and the retina is densely packed with rod cells that are exquisitely sensitive to even the faintest illumination. Having such enormous eyes comes with its own set of challenges. Like owl eyes, tarsier eyes are essentially fixed in their sockets. They cannot move their eyes to look around, but tarsiers have evolved the same solution as owls: the ability to rotate their heads approximately 180 degrees in either direction. This gives them a full 360-degree range of vision when they combine the rotation in both directions. Watching a tarsier scan its environment is mesmerizing. Its huge eyes stay perfectly still, while its head swivels almost owl-like, those enormous orbs reflecting any available light as it searches for prey. The tarsier's eyes have another unique feature. They possess a well-developed fovea, a small pit in the retina that is densely packed with photoreceptors and is responsible for sharp, detailed central vision. Most nocturnal animals have either no fovea or a poorly developed one because it typically works best in bright light conditions. But tarsiers have managed to develop acute vision for detail even in low light, giving them what scientists describe as the most acute night vision of any primate. This allows them to spot small insects and other prey items with remarkable precision, even in the dimmest light beneath the rainforest canopy. The design of nocturnal eyes reveals something profound about evolution. There is no single perfect solution to the challenge of seeing in the dark. Instead, different lineages have evolved different strategies, each optimized for their particular ecological niche and hunting style. Owls developed tubular eyes with the tapetum lucidum for enhanced light sensitivity. Tarsiers evolved eyes so large they push the physical limits of what a small skull can accommodate. Cats and raccoons have eyes that strike a balance, being neither as large as a tarsier's nor as tubular as an owl's, but equipped with an excellent tapetum lucidum and a favorable rod-to-cone ratio that serves them well in both dim and moderate light conditions. Some nocturnal animals have taken their visual adaptations even further. The eye of Madagascar, another nocturnal primate, has a tapetum lucidum that appears orange, giving its eyes an unsettling glow in the dark. Bush babies, small primates also called galagos, have developed exceptionally large eyes with a tapetum lucidum that can create a reddish or yellowish eye shine, and their retinas are so rich in rods that they can navigate and hunt in near total darkness. Each of these species has written its own chapter in the ongoing story of how life adapts to the challenges of darkness, and studying their eyes gives us a window into the remarkable creativity of evolution. As we move deeper into the night, we begin to appreciate that seeing is just one part of the nocturnal experience. The animals that own the darkness have learned to use all their senses in concert, weaving together sight, sound, touch, and smell into a complete picture of their world. But before we explore those other senses, take a moment to imagine what it might be like to have eyes like these creatures. To see the world transform as darkness falls, not into a void of black, but into a rich landscape of greys and silvers, where every movement stands out in sharp relief, and the faintest starlight is enough to illuminate your path. That is the gift of night vision, and it is only the beginning of the Nocturnal Animals Toolkit, hearing beyond silence. If eyes are the first tool that nocturnal animals use to navigate darkness, ears are often the second, and for many species, they are equally important, or even more so. Sound travels through the night air with remarkable clarity, unimpeded by the visual noise of a sunlit world. In the quietness after sunset, when birdsong fades and the rustle of daytime creatures subsides, the acoustic landscape of the night emerges, a symphony of rustles, squeaks, wing beats, and calls that nocturnal animals have learned to read with extraordinary precision. Consider the barn owl, a ghost of the night sky with its pale plumage and heart-shaped face. Scientists have demonstrated through carefully controlled experiments that barn owls can locate and capture prey in complete darkness using hearing alone. Not dim light, absolute darkness where visual cues are impossible. In these experiments, barn owls were placed in light-proof rooms with mice positioned on the floor. Even without being able to see anything at all, the owls could pinpoint the exact location of a mouse from the subtle sounds of its movement and capture it with perfect accuracy. This is a level of auditory precision that seems almost supernatural, but it's based on exquisite anatomy and sophisticated neural processing. The secret begins with the owl's facial disc, that distinctive heart-shaped arrangement of feathers that frames its face. This isn't merely decorative. The facial disc functions as a parabolic reflector, much like the dish of a satellite antenna, gathering sound waves from the environment and funneling them toward the owl's ears. Each individual feather in the facial disc is positioned precisely, and the owl can actually adjust the position of these feathers to fine-tune the sound-gathering properties of the disc, depending on what it's listening for. It's a biological version of cupping your hands around your ears to hear better, but far more sophisticated. Behind that facial disc lie the owl's ear openings, and here's where things get truly remarkable. Unlike human ears, which are positioned symmetrically on either side of the head at the same height, many owl species have asymmetrically placed ears. In a barn owl, one ear opening is located higher on the skull and points slightly upward, while the other is lower and points slightly downward. This asymmetry is not an accident or an imperfection. It's a precise adaptation that allows the owl to pinpoint the location of sounds with extraordinary accuracy in three-dimensional space. Here's how it works. When a sound reaches the owl, it arrives at each ear at slightly different times and with slightly different intensities, depending on where the sound is coming from. The owl's brain processes these tiny differences to calculate the sound's location. The horizontal position of a sound, whether it's to the left or right, is determined by which ear receives the sound first and more loudly. But the vertical position, whether the sound is above or below the owl, is determined by the difference in how the two asymmetrically placed ears receive the sound. A sound from above will be louder in the upward pointing ear. A sound from below will be stronger in the downward pointing ear. By comparing these differences, the owl's brain can create a precise three-dimensional map of where the sound originated. This process happens almost instantaneously. The neural circuits in the owl's brain are wired specifically to process these timing and intensity differences with incredible speed and precision. Scientists call this stereophonic hearing, and it's so accurate that an owl can determine the position of a mouse in complete darkness to within about 1 degree of arc, roughly the width of your thumb held at arm's length. This means that even in pitch blackness, the owl knows exactly where to strike. But there's another challenge that nocturnal hunters like owls face. If you're hunting animals with good hearing, like mice and voles, those prey animals can hear you coming. The sound of wings flapping, the rush of air as a predator approaches. These sounds can trigger evasive action that means the difference between a successful hunt and going hungry. Owls have evolved an extraordinary solution to this problem as well. They fly almost completely silently, making them among the quietest flying animals on Earth. This silent flight is achieved through several specialized features of owl feathers. The leading edge of an owl's primary flight feathers has a comb-like fringe of tiny projections. These projections break up the air flowing over the wing, disrupting the formation of large turbulent vortices that would create noise. It's similar to the principle behind serrated edges on some airplane wings and wind turbine blades, which are designed to reduce noise. The trailing edge of the flight feathers is also fringed, further dampening sound. Additionally, the surface of owl feathers has a velvety texture created by thousands of tiny filaments that extend from each feather barb. This texture absorbs sound rather than reflecting it. The result is that when an owl swoops down on its prey, the mouse or vole typically has no acoustic warning at all. By the time it might sense something is wrong, those sharp talons are already closing in. Researchers have measured owl flight using extremely sensitive microphones and found that the sound produced by a flying barn owl is so quiet it's essentially at the threshold of human hearing. While other birds of similar size produce sound levels of around 40 to 50 decibels during flight, a barn owl produces sound at about 10 decibels, quieter than a whisper in a library. If owls represent masters of passive listening, bats represent masters of active acoustic sensing. While owls listen to sounds produced by their prey, bats create their own sounds and listen to the echoes, a technique called echolocation. This biological sonar system is so sophisticated that it allows bats to build detailed three-dimensional maps of their environment, navigate through complex obstacles, and catch flying insects in complete darkness with astounding precision. The sounds bats produce for echolocation are ultrasonic, meaning they're above the frequency range that humans can hear. While humans can generally hear sounds up to about 20,000 Hz, bat echolocation calls range from about 14,000 Hz to well over 100,000 Hz. Most of these calls are produced in the larynx and emitted through either the open mouth or, in some species like horseshoe bats, through the nose. The intensity of these calls is remarkable. At a distance of 10 centimeters from a bat's mouth, echolocation calls can measure up to 140 decibels, roughly as loud as a jet engine. It's fortunate for us that we can't hear most of these calls, as they would be painfully loud. When a bat emits an echolocation call, the sound waves travel outward until they encounter an object. Some of the sound energy bounces back as an echo, and the bat's highly specialized ears detect this returning sound. By analyzing the time delay between when the call was emitted and when the echo returns, the bat's brain can calculate how far away the object is. If the echo returns quickly, the object is close. If it takes longer, the object is farther away. This is the same principle used by ship sonar and radar systems, but bats evolved it millions of years before humans discovered it. But distance is just the beginning of what bats can determine through echolocation. The intensity of the returning echo provides information about the size of the object. Larger objects reflect more sound energy back toward the bat, producing louder echoes. Smaller objects produce fainter echoes. The quality and texture of the echo reveal information about the object's surface properties. A smooth surface produces a different echo than a rough surface. A solid object sounds different from something with a complex structure, like a flying insect with wings and legs. Some bats can even determine what species of insect they're detecting based on the pattern of echoes bouncing off the insect's moving wings. Perhaps most remarkably, bats can detect movement using the Doppler effect. When an object is moving toward the bat, the frequency of the returning echo is slightly higher than the frequency of the original call. When the object is moving away, the echo frequency is slightly lower. This is the same phenomenon that makes an ambulance siren sound higher pitched as it approaches and lower pitched as it moves away. By detecting these frequency shifts, bats can determine not just where an object is, but also how fast it's moving and in which direction. The entire process of echolocation happens incredibly quickly. When a bat is searching for prey, it might emit echolocation calls at a rate of about 10 to 20 per second, giving it regular updates on its surroundings. But as it closes in on a flying insect, the call rate increases dramatically to what's called the terminal buzz, a rapid-fire sequence of calls that can reach over 200 per second. This intense burst of echolocation calls provides the bat with an almost continuous stream of information about the insect's exact position and trajectory in the final moments before capture, allowing it to make the split-second adjustments needed to intercept its target. Different species of bats have evolved different echolocation strategies suited to their particular hunting styles and habitats. Bats that hunt in open spaces, far from obstacles, tend to emit longer, narrower frequency calls that can detect objects at greater distances. These calls can reach out 50 meters or more, giving the bat plenty of advance warning of potential prey. Bats that hunt closer to vegetation use shorter, broader frequency calls that provide more detailed information about nearby objects, essential for navigating through cluttered environments where the echo landscape is complex and confusing. The neural processing required for echolocation is mind-bogglingly sophisticated. A bat's brain must separate its own echolocation calls from the multitude of returning echoes, filter out irrelevant echoes from stationary objects like trees and rocks, focus on echoes from potential prey, calculate distances and movements, and do all of this while flying at high speed, often in complete darkness, sometimes while surrounded by hundreds or thousands of other bats, all calling at the same time. The auditory cortex of a bat's brain, the region that processes sound information, is proportionally larger and more complex than in most other mammals, reflecting the computational demands of echolocation. But bats aren't the only animals using echolocation. Some species of shrews produce clicks and appear to use the echoes to orient themselves in their underground tunnels and burrows. There's even evidence that some blind humans can learn a form of echolocation, clicking with their tongues and learning to interpret the returning echoes to navigate and identify objects. While human echolocation doesn't approach the sophistication of bat echolocation, it demonstrates that the basic principles of acoustic sensing are accessible to our own species when necessity requires it. The acoustic world of nocturnal animals reveals something profound about how senses can be expanded and refined through evolution. What begins as basic hearing becomes, in the hands of natural selection, a tool for building detailed mental maps of the environment, for detecting the subtlest movements, for navigating in absolute darkness, and for capturing prey with deadly precision. Sound, invisible and ephemeral, becomes as concrete and useful as light, perhaps even more so when darkness makes seeing impossible. As we listen to the night, we're really hearing two worlds at once. There's the world of sounds we can perceive, the hoots of owls, the rustle of leaves, the chirp of crickets, and then there's the hidden world of ultrasonic calls and echoes, of acoustic beams sweeping through the darkness, of tiny ears triangulating every sound to pinpoint its source with astounding accuracy. It's a reminder that our perception of the world, filtered through our own sensory limitations, captures only a fraction of what's really happening in the darkness around us. The language of light. In the depths of night, when the moon is dark and clouds obscure the stars, certain creatures produce their own light, turning their bodies into living lanterns that pierce the darkness with gentle glows. This is bioluminescence, the ability of living organisms to generate light through chemical reactions, and it represents one of the most enchanting mysteries of the nocturnal world. On a warm summer evening, few sights are as magical as fireflies drifting through a meadow, their tiny bodies flickering with golden green light in patterns that seem almost like Morse code sent from one tiny beacon to another. Fireflies, also called lightning bugs, are actually beetles in the family Lampyridae, and they've mastered the art of cold light, light produced with almost no heat. This is remarkable because traditional light sources, from candles to incandescent bulbs, waste enormous amounts of energy as heat. A standard incandescent bulb converts only about 5% of its energy into visible light, with the rest escaping as heat. But firefly light is nearly 100% efficient. Almost all the energy from the chemical reaction is released as visible light, with virtually no heat produced. If fireflies generated light the way a light bulb does, they would quite literally cook themselves from the inside. The chemistry of firefly light is elegant in its simplicity. Inside specialized organs in the firefly's abdomen, called photocytes, or light-producing cells, a chemical called luciferin reacts with oxygen in the presence of an enzyme called luciferase. This reaction produces an unstable molecule called oxyluciferin in an excited state. As this excited molecule returns to a lower energy state, it releases a photon of light. Adding to the reaction are adenosine triphosphate, the universal energy currency of cells, and magnesium ions, which help the reaction proceed efficiently. The firefly controls this light production with remarkable precision. By regulating the supply of oxygen to the photocytes, it can turn the light on and off, creating the characteristic flashing patterns that we see on summer nights. Recent research suggests that nitric oxide plays a crucial role in this control mechanism. When nitric oxide is released in the light organ, it temporarily binds to the mitochondria, the power plants of cells, allowing oxygen to flow into the photocytes, where it can participate in the light-producing reaction. When nitric oxide is no longer being produced, oxygen is again sequestered by the mitochondria and becomes unavailable for light production, causing the glow to cease. This elegant on-off switch allows fireflies to create flashes that last anywhere from a fraction of a second to several seconds, depending on the species and the message being sent. And messages are indeed what those flashes are conveying. The primary function of adult firefly bioluminescence is communication, specifically courtship communication between males and females looking for mates. Each species of firefly has its own unique flash pattern, a specific sequence of flashes with particular timing, duration, and sometimes even a particular trajectory of flight. This species-specific signaling system helps fireflies ensure they're attracting the right mate and not wasting time and energy on impossible interspecies courtships. A typical firefly courtship scenario unfolds something like this. Males fly through the air, usually at a specific height above the ground, emitting their species-specific flash pattern. The common eastern firefly, Phytinus pyralis, provides a beautiful example. A male flies about 3 feet above the ground, producing a 1-second flash as he flies in a J-shaped pattern. He repeats this display every 5 seconds or so, cruising through the evening air in search of a receptive female. Females typically rest on vegetation or on the ground, watching the aerial displays of the males above. When a female sees a male of her species performing the correct flash pattern, she responds with her own flash, carefully timed to occur at a specific interval after the male's flash ends. In Phytinus pyralis, the female waits about 2 seconds after seeing the male's flash, then produces her own half-second flash. The male, seeing this response, recognizes it as a signal from a receptive female of his own species. He alters his flight path to move toward the source of her flash, and as he approaches, the two continue their duet of light, the male flashing and the female responding, each flash helping to guide the male closer to his potential mate. If all goes well, the male eventually locates the female, and courtship proceeds to mating. It's an elegant system of communication, visual signals sent across the darkness in a language written in light. But the world of firefly signaling isn't always straightforward. Some species have evolved to exploit this communication system in sinister ways. Fireflies in the genus Futurus, sometimes called femme fatale fireflies, have developed the ability to mimic the flash patterns of other species. After a female Futurus has mated, she switches from her own species' signaling pattern to imitating the flash responses of female Phytinus fireflies. When a male Phytinus approaches, expecting to find a mate, he instead encounters a predator. The Futurus female captures and consumes him, gaining not just nutrition, but also defensive chemicals that these prey fireflies contain in their bodies. Fireflies produce toxic steroids called lucibuffogens that make them distasteful and even poisonous to many predators. These compounds provide a chemical defense that protects fireflies from birds, spiders, and other potential predators. Futurus fireflies cannot manufacture these defensive chemicals themselves, so by consuming other fireflies, they acquire lucibuffogens and incorporate them into their own tissues and into their eggs, protecting both themselves and their offspring. It's a remarkable example of aggressive mimicry, where a predator disguises itself as something harmless, or, in this case, as something desirable to lure in prey. The story of firefly bioluminescence becomes even more fascinating when we look at synchronized flashing. In certain species, large groups of male fireflies flash in unison, creating waves of light that pulse through the forest like a coordinated light show. This phenomenon occurs in several species around the world, but some of the most famous displays happen in the Appalachian Mountains of North America, where the firefly Photinus carolinus creates spectacular synchronized displays, and in the forests of Southeast Asia, where entire trees full of fireflies flash in perfect coordination, creating beacons that can be seen from great distances. Scientists have studied these synchronous fireflies extensively to understand how they achieve such remarkable coordination without any central control or conductor. The answer lies in a process called phase coupling, where each firefly adjusts its own flashing rhythm in response to the flashes it sees from its neighbors. Imagine a large group where each individual is flashing at approximately the same rate, but not quite in sync. Each firefly watches the flashes around it and makes tiny adjustments to its own timing, speeding up slightly or slowing down slightly to better match what it's seeing. When thousands of fireflies all do this simultaneously, they gradually converge on a synchronized rhythm where everyone flashes at the same moment. The evolution of synchronous flashing may have multiple benefits. For males, flashing together means that each individual signal isn't lost in a confusing chaos of flashes from competitors. Instead, the dramatic synchronized display might be more visible to females, who can more easily locate the general area where males are displaying. For females, watching a synchronized display might make it easier to compare males and choose the best potential mates. The exact evolutionary pressures that led to synchronized flashing are still being studied, but the displays themselves have captured human imagination for centuries, appearing in folklore and stories from cultures around the world. What's particularly remarkable is that the bioluminescent system in fireflies originally evolved not for courtship, but for defense. Firefly larvae, which live in soil and leaf litter and prey on earthworms, slugs, and other soft-bodied invertebrates, also produce light. These larval fireflies, often called glowworms, emit a steady glow rather than flashes, and this glow appears to serve as a warning signal to potential predators. The message is clear: I am toxic, leave me alone. This is an example of aposematism, warning coloration, or signaling that advertises an organism's toxicity or unpalatability to would-be predators. Over evolutionary time, adult fireflies co-opted this ancestral defensive light production system and transformed it into a communication tool for finding mates. The study of bioluminescence has provided scientists with powerful tools for research in molecular biology and medicine. The luciferase enzyme from fireflies has been genetically engineered into other organisms to create biological reporters that glow when specific genes are activated. This allows researchers to track gene expression, study disease processes, and develop new medical diagnostics. The same enzyme that helps a firefly find a mate on a summer night has become an invaluable tool for advancing human knowledge and health. It's a beautiful example of how understanding nature's solutions to biological challenges can lead to practical applications we never anticipated. Other nocturnal creatures also use bioluminescence, though not always for the same purposes. In the ocean, where darkness reigns even during the day in the deep sea, bioluminescence is remarkably common. Some fish use bioluminescent lures to attract prey, dangling glowing appendages in front of their mouths, like anglers with luminous bait. Others use light to communicate with potential mates, much like fireflies. Still others use bioluminescence for camouflage, a technique called counter-illumination, where they produce light on their undersides to match the dim light filtering down from above, effectively erasing their silhouettes when viewed from below. On land, bioluminescence is less common, but no less remarkable where it occurs. In addition to fireflies, there are bioluminescent fungi that cause rotting wood to glow with a ghostly green light, possibly attracting insects that help disperse fungal spores. Some centipedes and millipedes can produce bioluminescent secretions as a defense mechanism. In New Zealand and Australia, glowworm caves attract thousands of tourists who come to see the spectacular light displays created by the larvae of fungus gnats hanging from cave ceilings, their bioluminescent threads dangling like stars in an underground night sky. The chemistry of bioluminescence varies across different organisms. While fireflies use luciferin and luciferase, other bioluminescent creatures use different chemical systems. Marine organisms often use a luciferin called coenterazine, which can produce blue or green light depending on the specific luciferase enzyme present. The biochemistry has been independently invented multiple times across different lineages of life, a beautiful example of convergent evolution, where similar solutions arise to similar challenges. As we watch fireflies dance through a summer meadow, we're witnessing something truly ancient. Bioluminescence in insects has been traced back to the Cretaceous period, over 100 million years ago. These tiny beetles, flashing in the darkness, are using a communication system that predates the rise of modern mammals, a system that has remained effective and beautiful through countless generations. Their light reminds us that darkness is not an absence, not an empty void, but a stage upon which life has learned to create its own illumination, turning the night into a canvas for displays of light that serve survival, and, to our eyes at least, inspire wonder. Touch in the dark. While eyes detect light and ears detect sound, there's another sense that becomes crucial in the darkness: touch. For many nocturnal animals, the ability to feel their environment directly provides information that sight and sound cannot convey. Touch tells them about texture, temperature, shape, and movement at the most intimate level, letting them literally reach out and know their world through physical contact. Some nocturnal animals have evolved touch sensitivity so refined that it borders on the extraordinary. Consider the raccoon, a common nocturnal mammal found throughout North and Central America. By day, raccoons might appear to be just moderately clever opportunists, but by night, they reveal themselves as tactile virtuosos. A raccoon's front paws are remarkably human-like in their structure, with 5 long, slender fingers that can grasp, manipulate, and explore objects with dexterity that rivals our own hands. But what truly sets raccoon paws apart isn't their shape, it's their sensitivity. The skin on a raccoon's paws, particularly on the palmar surfaces and fingertips, is packed with an incredibly high density of mechanoreceptors, specialized nerve endings that detect pressure, vibration, and texture. These mechanoreceptors are so numerous and so sensitive that a raccoon can identify objects through touch alone, even without looking at them. In fact, raccoons often close their eyes when investigating something with their paws, relying entirely on tactile feedback to understand what they're examining. One of the most distinctive behaviors of raccoons is called dowsing, or more commonly, what looks like washing food. You've probably seen videos of raccoons appearing to wash their food in water before eating it. While this behavior has led to the scientific name Procyon-lotor, which translates to washer dog, the raccoon isn't actually washing its food in the sense of cleaning it. Instead, the water serves to enhance the raccoon's already extraordinary sense of touch. When a raccoon's paws are wet, the mechanoreceptors become even more sensitive, allowing the animal to gather more detailed information about the texture, consistency, and structure of whatever it's handling. Submerging food items in water while manipulating them essentially creates a more detailed tactile image in the raccoon's brain, helping it better evaluate what it's about to eat. This heightened tactile sensitivity is particularly valuable for an omnivorous nocturnal forager. Raccoons eat an incredibly diverse diet that includes fruits, nuts, insects, frogs, crayfish, bird eggs, and even small fish. In the darkness, being able to identify food items by touch alone, to feel the difference between a ripe fruit and an unripe one, or to detect the movement of a crayfish lurking under a rock, provides a significant advantage. The raccoon's sensitive paws essentially give it a second way of seeing, one based on touch rather than light. Remarkably, the sensitivity of a raccoon's paws actually increases underwater. While we might expect water to deaden sensation, for raccoons it's the opposite. The water enhances the transmission of tactile information, allowing them to find and capture aquatic prey items like crayfish, frogs, and small fish using touch alone. Watch a raccoon foraging along a stream bank at night, and you'll see it reaching into the water, sweeping its sensitive paws across the substrate, feeling for prey, items that it cannot see in the dark, murky water. When those dexterous fingers detect something of interest, they can quickly grab it, assess it through touch, and bring it to the mouth, all without the animal needing to see what it's caught. Whiskers, called vibrissae in scientific terminology, provide another crucial tactile sense for many nocturnal animals. These specialized hairs are much more than decoration. Each vibrissa is embedded in a follicle richly supplied with nerve endings, and even the slightest deflection of the whisker generates neural signals that the brain can interpret. Cats, both domestic and wild, use their whiskers to gather detailed information about their immediate surroundings. The whiskers on a cat's muzzle are arranged in rows, and they're positioned at roughly the same width as the cat's body. This isn't coincidental. When a cat is moving through narrow spaces in the dark, the whiskers act as feelers that tell the animal whether an opening is wide enough for its body to pass through. If the whiskers touch the sides of an opening, the cat knows it's too narrow and will look for another route. This prevents the cat from getting stuck in tight spaces, a vulnerability that could be fatal if the animal needed to escape from a predator. But whiskers do far more than measure width. They detect tiny changes in air currents, allowing a cat to sense the movement of nearby objects even in complete darkness. When a mouse scurries past a cat, the movement creates minute disturbances in the air, and the cat's whiskers pick up these disturbances, alerting the predator to prey that it cannot see. Whiskers can also help cats judge distances when preparing to pounce, providing proprioceptive feedback about head position and orientation that supplements visual information. In dim light or darkness, these tactile signals become primary rather than supplementary. Some animals have taken tactile sensing to even more extreme levels. The star-nosed mole, while not strictly nocturnal, it's active both day and night, has developed what is possibly the most unusual and sensitive touch organ in the entire animal kingdom. This small mammal, about the size of a hamster, lives in wet lowland areas in eastern North America, spending most of its life in underground tunnels and occasionally swimming in streams and ponds. The mole is essentially blind, with eyes so tiny they're almost invisible, covered by skin and fur. Instead of relying on sight, the star-nosed mole navigates and hunts using touch, specifically through the incredible sensory structure from which it gets its name. At the tip of the star-nosed mole's snout is a ring of 22 fleshy pink appendages called rays that radiate outward like the points of a star. These rays are constantly in motion, touching and tapping everything in the mole's environment at an almost frantic pace. Each ray is covered with thousands of tiny sensory organs, called Eimer's organs, and the entire star contains over 25,000 of these structures, making it one of the most sensitive touch organs known to science. The Eimer's organs can detect incredibly fine details about texture and shape. The star-nosed mole uses this super-sensitive touch organ to explore its environment and locate prey, primarily small invertebrates like earthworms, insect larvae, and aquatic crustaceans. What's truly astounding is the speed at which the mole can process this tactile information and act on it. Studies have shown that a star-nosed mole can identify and consume a prey item in as little as 120 milliseconds, less than the time it takes you to blink your eye. It's one of the fastest feeding reflexes ever recorded in a mammal. The mole's brain is essentially wired for ultra-fast processing of tactile information, allowing it to exploit its underground environment with remarkable efficiency. The tactile sense extends beyond specialized organs and includes the entire body surface for some animals. Many nocturnal spiders have tactile hairs covering their bodies that are exquisitely sensitive to vibration. These hairs allow spiders to detect the movements of prey that have become entangled in their webs, even in complete darkness. Different types of movements produce different vibration patterns, and the spider can distinguish between a struggling insect that might be food and, say, a leaf blown by the wind that's merely a nuisance. Nocturnal snakes have developed tactile sensing that helps them hunt warm-blooded prey in darkness, while some snakes like pit vipers have evolved heat-sensing pit organs that detect infrared radiation. Many others rely more heavily on touch and chemical sensing. As a snake moves through its environment, the scales on its belly are in constant contact with the substrate, and the snake can detect minute variations in texture and temperature that help it track prey. The forked tongue, flickering in and out, collects chemical particles from the air and ground, carrying them to a specialized organ called Jacobson's organ in the roof of the mouth, where they're analyzed. This is chemical touch, in a sense, a way of tasting the environment to gather information. The importance of touch in the nocturnal world reveals something fundamental about sensory adaptation. When one sense becomes limited, life doesn't simply accept that limitation. it enhances other senses to compensate, or it evolves new sensory structures altogether. The raccoon's exquisitely sensitive paws, the cat's array of whiskers, the star-nosed mole's incredible tactile appendages. These all represent evolution's solutions to the challenge of gathering information when light is scarce or absent. For animals living in darkness, touch provides certainty. Sight can be deceived by shadows and camouflage, and even sound can be confused by echoes and wind, but touch is direct and unambiguous. When a raccoon's fingers close around a crayfish, there's no doubt about what's been caught. When a cat's whiskers brush against an obstacle, the message is clear. Turn aside. Touch connects an animal directly to the physical reality of its environment, providing information that is immediate, reliable, and often essential for survival in the darkness. The invisible hunters. The night belongs to predators. While darkness provides cover for prey, animals trying to avoid detection, it also provides cover for the hunters stalking them. Nocturnal predators have evolved an impressive array of strategies for locating, pursuing, and capturing prey when the sun has set and most of the world has retreated to safety. These hunting strategies reveal the remarkable sophistication with which evolution has solved the problem of finding food in darkness. Owls are perhaps the most iconic nocturnal predators, and their hunting strategy is a masterclass in stealth and precision. We've already explored their exceptional vision and hearing, but the way these senses come together during a hunt deserves closer attention. An owl typically hunts from a perch, settling onto a branch or fence post at the edge of open hunting ground, fields, meadows, or forest clearings where rodents are active. There it sits, almost motionless, its head swiveling slowly as it scans the landscape below. Those enormous eyes are detecting any movement, any contrast against the background. The asymmetrically placed ears are sorting through the acoustic environment, filtering out wind sounds and irrelevant rustles, listening for the particular frequencies produced by a mouse moving through grass or a vole scurrying across leaf litter. The owl's brain is integrating visual and auditory information simultaneously, building a detailed map of where every potential prey item is located. When an owl detects prey, the attack sequence is swift and nearly silent. The owl launches from its perch, those specially adapted feathers muffling the sound of its wing beats to near nothingness. During the flight, the owl keeps its head remarkably stable, locked onto the target with its fixed eyes, while its body maneuvers beneath. This head stability is crucial. It's analogous to a camera on a stabilization gimbal, keeping the target centered in the owl's field of view, even as the bird's body twists and adjusts during flight. As the owl closes in, it extends its legs forward, spreading its talons wide. The feet are equipped with incredibly strong grip strength, and the talons are razor sharp. At the last instant, the owl's feet swing forward and down, and the bird essentially breaks in the air, using its wings to slow its momentum as the talons close around the prey. The force of the strike and the grip of the talons are usually immediately fatal to small rodents. The owl then typically returns to a perch to consume its catch, tearing it apart with its sharp, hooked beak. What makes this hunting strategy so effective is the combination of patience and precision. An owl doesn't expend energy chasing prey across long distances. Instead, it selects a good hunting perch and waits, using its superior senses to detect prey at a distance, then launching a single, decisive strike. Success rates for owl hunts vary by species and conditions, but experienced adult owls can achieve success rates of 30 to 50% or higher, far better than many other predators. But not all nocturnal hunters use the sit and wait strategy of owls. Bats, by necessity, must hunt on the wing, pursuing flying insects through the three-dimensional space of the night sky. Bat hunting strategies vary considerably depending on the species and the prey they're targeting, but all share certain common elements rooted in the remarkable capabilities of echolocation. A bat hunting for insects in open air begins its night by emerging from its roost, often at dusk or shortly after. It begins emitting what are called search phase echolocation calls, relatively slow-paced calls, perhaps 10 to 20 per second, with each call designed to survey a large volume of space. These calls allow the bat to create a general acoustic picture of its environment while searching for the telltale echoes of flying insects. When a bat detects a potential prey item, it switches to approach phase calls, increasing the call rate to perhaps 30 to 50 per second, and adjusting the call parameters to get more detailed information about the target. The bat changes its flight path to intercept the insect, and as it closes the distance, its echolocation calls become more frequent and shorter in duration, providing updates on the target's position at ever shorter intervals. In the final moments of pursuit, the bat enters what's called the terminal phase or buzz phase. The echolocation call rate explodes to over 200 calls per second, creating an almost continuous stream of acoustic information. This allows the bat to track the insect's last instant evasive maneuvers and adjust its own flight path with split-second timing. When the bat finally closes with its prey, it has several strategies for capture. Some bats catch insects directly in their mouths. Others use their wings to bat the insect toward their tail membrane, which they curl forward like a scoop to trap the insect, then bend down to grab it from the membrane with their teeth. The entire sequence, from initial detection to capture, might take only a few seconds. The aerial agility required for this hunting strategy is extraordinary. Bats can make sharp turns, loops, and dives while flying at speeds of up to 40 kilometers per hour or more, all while continuously emitting and processing echolocation calls and adjusting their flight path in response to the returning echoes. The cognitive demands are immense, yet bats make it look effortless, snatching insects from the air with remarkable precision. Different bat species have evolved different hunting strategies suited to different prey and environments. Some bats hunt close to vegetation, where the acoustic environment is cluttered with echoes from leaves, branches, and other surfaces. These bats typically emit shorter, broader frequency calls that provide detailed information about nearby objects and help them distinguish prey from background clutter. Other bats hunt high in the open sky, where there's little clutter, but prey might be farther away. These species use longer, narrower frequency calls that can detect insects at greater distances. Some bats are gleaners, hunting prey on surfaces rather than in the air. These bats fly slowly and quietly, listening for sounds made by prey items on leaves, on the ground, or on bark. When they hear an interesting sound, they swoop in and pluck the prey from its surface. Some gleaning bats supplement echolocation with passive listening, using their large ears to detect the sounds made by prey directly, much like an owl. On the ground, nocturnal predators face different challenges and employ different strategies. Cats, from small domestic felines to large wild species like leopards and jaguars, are primarily visual hunters that rely on excellent low-light vision, combined with patient stalking and explosive bursts of speed. A cat hunting at night moves with deliberate slowness, staying low to the ground, using cover and shadows to approach prey without being detected. The cat's excellent night vision allows it to see its prey clearly, even in dim conditions, while the prey, if it's a species with less effective night vision, might not see the cat until it's too late. The cat uses its whiskers and sense of hearing to supplement vision, detecting prey movement through sound and feeling air currents with its vibrissae. When the cat judges the distance is right, typically when it's within a few body lengths of the prey, it springs forward in a burst of speed, closing the final distance in less than a second. The rear legs provide the power for the leap, while the front paws, equipped with retractable claws, reach out to grab and pin the prey. A killing bite to the back of the neck or throat typically follows immediately. Ambush predators like pythons and boa constrictors employ a very different strategy. These snakes don't pursue prey actively. Instead, they position themselves along trails or near water sources, anywhere prey is likely to pass, and they wait. With their low metabolic rates, large snakes can afford to wait for days or even weeks without eating, conserving energy until an opportunity presents itself. When suitable prey approaches, the snake strikes with remarkable speed. Despite their reputation for slowness, pythons and boas can strike faster than a human eye can follow, their heads shooting forward to seize prey in their jaws. Once the snake has a grip, it quickly coils its muscular body around the prey, constricting it. Contrary to popular belief, constricting snakes don't crush their prey or break bones. Instead, they suffocate it. Each time the prey exhales, the snake tightens its coils slightly, preventing the prey from inhaling again. Within minutes, the prey dies from lack of oxygen, and the snake can begin the process of swallowing it whole. Hunting success in the nocturnal world is never guaranteed. Prey animals have evolved their own counter-strategies, and the ongoing evolutionary arms race between predators and prey has shaped both sides over millions of years. A successful predator must be not just skilled, but also lucky, patient, and adaptive. The night provides opportunities for hunters, but it also presents challenges that require extraordinary adaptations to overcome. The nocturnal predators that we see today, the owls and bats, the cats and snakes, represent the successful lineages, the ones whose adaptations proved effective enough to allow them to thrive in the darkness. The hunted. For every nocturnal predator, there are nocturnal prey animals that have evolved their own suite of adaptations, not for hunting, but for avoiding being hunted. These defensive strategies are often just as sophisticated as the hunting strategies of predators, reflecting millions of years of evolutionary pressure to escape, hide, or deter those who would make a meal of them. The ongoing arms race between predator and prey has driven the evolution of some of nature's most fascinating defensive adaptations. Moths, the primary prey of many bat species, have evolved an arsenal of anti-bat defenses that are remarkably diverse and sophisticated. The most widespread defense is ultrasonic hearing. Many moth species have evolved ears that can detect the high-frequency echolocation calls that bats use to hunt. These ears are not located on the moth's head, as you might expect, but rather on various parts of the body depending on the moth family. Some moths have ears on their thorax, others on their abdomen, and some even have ears on their mouth parts. Despite these different locations, they all serve the same function, detecting incoming bats. When a moth hears the relatively faint, widely spaced echolocation calls of a distant bat, it initiates evasive action by turning and flying away from the source of the sound. This is called negative phonotaxis, moving away from sound. If the bat is far enough away and the moth detects it early, this simple strategy of flying in the opposite direction is often enough to escape. The moth can put distance between itself and the predator before the bat even knows the moth exists. But if the echolocation calls are loud and frequent, indicating that a bat is close and actively pursuing the moth's response becomes more dramatic. Many species execute erratic flight patterns, random loops, spirals, dives, and zigzags that make the moth's trajectory unpredictable. A bat's echolocation works beautifully for tracking steadily flying prey, but sudden, random changes in direction can cause the bat to lose track of the target or miscalculate its intercept trajectory. This chaotic flight behavior is essentially a gamble. The moth sacrifices efficient forward motion in favor of unpredictability, betting that the bat won't be able to follow its erratic path. Some moths take an even more extreme approach. When they detect a very close bat, loud echolocation calls suggesting immediate danger. They cease powered flight entirely and drop out of the sky. This is called a power dive or passive dive, and it's a last-ditch escape mechanism. The moth folds its wings and plummets toward the ground or into vegetation, removing itself from the aerial space where the bat is hunting. It's risky. The moth might hit the ground hard or become vulnerable to ground predators, but it's often better than being caught by a bat. Even more remarkably, some moths have evolved the ability to produce ultrasonic sounds of their own, and these sounds serve multiple defensive functions. Tiger moths, family Erebidee, are particularly well studied in this regard. When a tiger moth detects a bat, it begins producing rapid clicking sounds using specialized organs called tymbals, structures that buckle inward and outward to create sound. These clicks can serve three possible functions, and different species may use one or more of them. The first function is acoustic aposematism, essentially a warning signal. Many tiger moths contain toxic compounds that make them unpalatable to bats. The ultrasonic clicks serve as a warning. Don't eat me, I taste terrible. Bats that have learned to associate these clicks with a bad-tasting meal will avoid clicking moths in the future. This is similar to the bright warning colors that toxic animals display in daylight, but adapted for the acoustic sensory world of bats. The second function is Batesian mimicry. Some tiger moths that lack toxic compounds produce clicks that mimic the warning sounds of toxic species. These harmless moths are essentially lying, producing the acoustic equivalent of warning coloration without actually being dangerous or unpalatable. As long as bats cannot easily distinguish the mimic's clicks from the toxic model's clicks, the mimic gains protection. The third, and perhaps most dramatic, function is acoustic jamming. Some species of moths, particularly the tiger moth Bertholdia trigona, produce clicks at such an incredibly high rate, up to 4,500 clicks per second, that they actually interfere with the bat's echolocation. The moth's clicks arrive at the bat's ears along with the echoes from the bat's own echolocation calls, creating a confusing jumble of sound that makes it difficult for the bat to pinpoint the moth's location. Research has shown that this jamming is extraordinarily effective, reducing bat capture success by as much as 90%. It's one of the most effective anti-bat defenses ever documented. Recent research has revealed that ultrasound production by moths is far more widespread than previously thought. Moths from numerous families across the world have independently evolved the ability to produce defensive ultrasonic sounds, using different anatomical structures to create them. Some use tymbals, others click their wings together, and some produce sound through modified genitalia or scales on their abdomen. The diversity of sound-producing mechanisms suggests that there has been intense selection pressure for moths to develop acoustic defenses against bats. Some moths have even evolved passive acoustic defenses. The wings of many moth species absorb ultrasound rather than reflecting it, effectively making the moth harder to detect with echolocation. The wings' fuzzy, scale-covered surfaces and specialized internal structures dampen incoming sound waves, returning a much weaker echo to the bat. This acoustic stealth allows the moth to fly through an environment full of echolocating bats, while being significantly less detectable than it would be with plain wings that reflect sound normally. Rodents, another major group of nocturnal prey, have evolved different defensive strategies suited to their terrestrial lifestyle. Many nocturnal rodents rely on cryptic behavior and coloration to avoid detection. They move quickly between patches of cover, spending as little time as possible in the open where they might be spotted by owls or terrestrial predators. When they must venture into open areas, they often do so in irregular patterns, stopping and starting unpredictably, making themselves harder to track. Some rodents have evolved specialized escape behaviors. Kangaroo rats, desert rodents of North America, can execute spectacular, evasive leaps when attacked by snakes or owls. Using their powerful hind legs, they can jump several feet in distance and change direction in midair, often kicking sand or dirt toward the predator as they leap. These acrobatic escapes are powered by incredibly fast reaction times and neural circuits specialized for detecting and responding to predator movements. Social behavior also serves as a defense for some nocturnal prey. Prairie dogs and ground squirrels that are active at dusk post sentinels that watch for predators while the rest of the group forages. When a sentinel spots danger, it gives an alarm call that sends the group scurrying for the safety of their burrows. Even though each individual sacrifices some foraging time to serve as a lookout, the collective vigilance of the group means that predators are detected earlier and more reliably than if each animal watched only for itself. Chemical defenses also play a role in nocturnal predator-prey interactions. Skunks are famous for their ability to spray a foul-smelling chemical deterrent at predators. But many other animals employ chemical defenses as well. Some millipedes can secrete toxic or irritating compounds when threatened. Certain frogs produce skin toxins that make them poisonous to eat. These chemical defenses are often coupled with warning signals, which in the nocturnal world might be bioluminescence, distinctive sounds, or even smells that predators learn to associate with the chemical defense. The evolutionary arms race between nocturnal predators and prey is ongoing. As predators evolve more effective hunting strategies, prey evolve better defenses. As prey become harder to catch, predators evolve counter-adaptations to overcome those defenses. This co-evolutionary process has been running for hundreds of millions of years, creating the remarkable diversity of predator and prey adaptations we see today. The result is an ecological balance, a dynamic equilibrium where neither predators nor prey gain a permanent upper hand, but where both continue to evolve in response to each other, generation after generation, in the theatre of the night. Strange behaviours after dark. The darkness doesn't just change how animals hunt and hide. It also reveals behaviours that seem almost bizarre, rituals and actions that only make sense in the context of the nocturnal world. Some of these behaviours have been observed and documented by scientists, yet they remain poorly understood. Mysteries of the night that hint at the complexity of animal lives that we rarely witness. One of the strangest and most fascinating of these nocturnal behaviours is hedgehog self-anointing. If you've never witnessed this behaviour, it's difficult to imagine just how peculiar it is. Picture a hedgehog, a small, spiny mammal common across Europe, Asia, and Africa, going about its nightly routine of foraging for insects and other small invertebrates. Suddenly, the hedgehog encounters something with a new or interesting smell or taste. Perhaps a piece of rotting wood, a flower, a toad, or even a bit of discarded human detritus like a piece of leather or cloth. The hedgehog becomes fixated on this object, sniffing it intensely, licking it, and sometimes chewing on it. This continues for several minutes, and gradually the hedgehog begins producing copious amounts of frothy, foamy saliva. The foam can be white, or if the hedgehog has been chewing something with colour or odour, it might take on different tints, tan, brown, or even coloured by whatever substance triggered the behaviour. Then comes the truly remarkable part. The hedgehog begins contorting its body in seemingly impossible ways, twisting its neck and using its surprisingly long tongue to spread this foamy saliva onto its spines. The hedgehog will stand, stretch, bend, and twist into various postures as it methodically applies foam to different regions of its back and sides. The process can be brief, just a few minutes, or it can continue for an hour or more, with the hedgehog becoming so absorbed in the activity that it seems almost oblivious to its surroundings. An observer seeing this for the first time might think the animal is having a seizure or suffering from some kind of medical emergency. But self-anointing is completely normal behaviour for hedgehogs, observed in both wild and captive animals, across all hedgehog species worldwide. The mystery is this: no one knows exactly why hedgehogs do it. There are theories, several of them, and each has some evidence in its favour, but none can fully explain every instance of self-anointing. One theory is that self-anointing serves as a form of scent camouflage. By covering themselves with the smell of something from their environment, hedgehogs might be masking their own scent, making themselves less detectable to predators. This would be particularly useful for a relatively slow-moving animal whose primary defense, curling into a ball of spines, works best when predators don't find them in the first place. Another theory proposes that hedgehogs are spreading toxic substances onto their spines for defense. Hedgehogs are remarkably resistant to many toxins that would be lethal to other mammals. They can safely eat toxic toads, and they have some resistance to snake venom. The idea is that when a hedgehog encounters a toxic substance, it self-anoints with that substance, spreading the toxin onto its spines to make them even more formidable. Some research supports this. In one study, scientists allowed hedgehogs to self-anoint after chewing on cane toad skin, which contains toxic compounds. They then took spines that had been covered with the foam and use them to prick human volunteers. The spines that had been anointed with toad-contaminated foam caused significantly more irritation and burning than control spines, suggesting that the hedgehog had indeed transferred some of the toad's toxins to its defensive spines. However, this theory doesn't explain why hedgehogs also self-anoint with non-toxic substances. Some hedgehogs have been observed self-anointing with distilled water, which has no taste or smell, and certainly no toxins. Others anoint after encountering completely innocuous materials, like cotton or glass. So, while the toxin transfer hypothesis might explain some instances of self-anointing, it doesn't appear to be the whole story. A third theory suggests that self-anointing might be related to scent marking or communication with other hedgehogs. Perhaps the foam contains pheromones or chemical signals that convey information to other hedgehogs about the anointing individual's sex, reproductive status, or territory. Studies have found that male hedgehogs self-anoint more frequently than females, and young hedgehogs anoint more often than adults, which could be consistent with a social communication function. However, direct evidence that other hedgehogs actually detect and respond to these scent signals is limited. Yet, another theory proposes that hedgehogs are simply trying to remember novel smells by mixing them with saliva and depositing the mixture on their spines. This would essentially create a library of scents that the hedgehog has encountered, perhaps helping it remember which substances are safe or dangerous, or which areas of its territory contain particular resources. It's an intriguing idea, but it's difficult to test whether hedgehogs actually use their spine coating in this way. The truth might be that different instances of self-anointing serve different purposes, or that the behavior has multiple functions that all provide some benefit. Or it's possible that self-anointing is a behavior that once served a clear adaptive purpose, but has since been maintained in the hedgehog behavioral repertoire, even as its original function became less important. Evolution doesn't always produce behaviors that make perfect sense to us as observers. Sometimes behaviors persist simply because they don't significantly harm the animal, and as long as they're not harmful, there's no strong selective pressure to eliminate them. What makes self-anointing particularly fascinating is that it's just one example of the many behaviors that animals perform under cover of darkness that we're only beginning to understand. Nocturnal animals engage in complex social interactions, territorial disputes, courtship displays, and maintenance behaviors that are difficult to observe and study because they happen at night when human observers can't easily watch without disturbing the animals. Some nocturnal animals engage in elaborate territorial marking behaviors at night. Many species of cats, from domestic cats to large wild felids like leopards, spend considerable time marking their territories with scent. They rub facial glands on objects to deposit pheromones. They scratch trees and logs to leave visual marks combined with scent from glands in their paws. And they urinate and defecate in prominent locations, sometimes deliberately positioning their scat to maximize its visibility and scent dispersal. These marking behaviors are more than just claims of ownership. They're a complex communication system that conveys information about the marking animal's sex, reproductive condition, health status, and how recently the marks were made. Nocturnal primates like lorises and galagos also mark their territories extensively. Slow lorises produce a toxic secretion from glands on their elbows, and they mix this secretion with saliva before spreading it on their fur and on branches throughout their territory. This serves both as a territorial marker and as a defensive measure, as the toxin makes the loris unpalatable to many predators. Galagos, or bush babies, engage in something called urine washing, where they urinate on their hands and feet, and then walk around, leaving scent trails wherever they travel. These trails help the animals navigate through their territories in the dark and communicate with other galagos about territorial boundaries. Some nocturnal animals engage in communal behaviors that occur only at night. Flying squirrels often nest together in groups during the day, huddling for warmth in tree cavities, but at night they forage individually. Before dispersing to forage, and again when they return before dawn, the group members engage in social grooming, reinforcing social bonds and helping to regulate the colony's social structure. Similarly, many bat species that roost in large colonies engage in social behaviors within the roost when they return from nightly foraging, including mother-offspring reunions, where female bats must locate their specific offspring among thousands or even millions of other young bats in the roost. The night is also when many animals engage in courtship and mating. Nocturnal geckos produce elaborate calls to attract mates, and males sometimes engage in visual displays as well, despite the darkness, suggesting that female geckos can see these displays better than we might expect. Many species of frogs are nocturnal and gather at breeding ponds to call and attract females, creating the nighttime choruses that are familiar to anyone who has spent time near wetlands in spring and summer. Each species has its own distinctive call, and females select mates based partly on the characteristics of male calls, such as their loudness, frequency, and duration. These nighttime behaviors, from the bizarre self-anointing of hedgehogs to the complex social interactions of bats and primates, remind us that the nocturnal world is full of activities and interactions that parallel the daytime world in complexity, but differ in the specific adaptations required. The darkness shapes not just how animals sense their environment, but how they interact with each other, how they communicate, how they defend territories, and how they go about the fundamental business of survival and reproduction. The night shift. The nocturnal lifestyle isn't random. Animals don't become active at night simply by chance. There are powerful evolutionary pressures that drive some species to abandon the daylight world and adopt a life in darkness. Understanding why animals become nocturnal helps us appreciate the trade-offs involved and the ecological factors that make nocturnality advantageous for so many species. One of the most important factors driving nocturnality is predator avoidance. This is particularly evident in the evolutionary history of mammals. During the Mesozoic era, roughly 250 million to 66 million years ago, dinosaurs dominated terrestrial ecosystems during the day. The Mesozoic was their time, and the Earth's daytime hours belonged to these often large, often fearsome reptiles. Early mammals, which evolved during this time, were generally small, roughly the size of modern mice to rats, and would have been vulnerable to predation by many dinosaur species. The prevailing theory suggests that early mammals adopted nocturnal lifestyles as a way to avoid dinosaur predators, most of which were diurnal. By being active at night, early mammals could forage, hunt, and go about their lives in relative safety, when most of their major predators were asleep. This period of millions of years living in the shadow of dinosaurs, literally and figuratively, shaped mammalian evolution profoundly. It's often called the nocturnal bottleneck, a time when most mammals were constrained to nighttime activity. During this nocturnal period, mammals evolved many of the sensory adaptations we've been discussing: enhanced senses of smell and hearing, the tapetum lucidum for better night vision, sensitive vibrissae for tactile sensing. They also lost some of the sensory capabilities that diurnal reptiles and birds possess. Most mammals have relatively poor color vision compared to birds and many reptiles, for example, with most species having only 2 types of cone cells compared to the 3 that humans have, and the 4 or more that many birds possess. This reduction in color vision likely occurred during the nocturnal bottleneck, when color vision was less useful in the dim light of night, and the resources that would have gone into maintaining sophisticated color vision were instead allocated to enhancing other senses more useful in darkness. After the mass extinction event 66 million years ago that ended the Mesozoic and wiped out non-avian dinosaurs, mammals began to diversify and exploit the ecological niches left vacant by the extinct dinosaurs. Many mammal lineages evolved to become diurnal once again, taking advantage of the daytime world that was suddenly safer for them. But the legacy of the nocturnal bottleneck remained in mammalian sensory systems, and many mammal species retained their nocturnal lifestyles or evolved nocturnality anew because it continued to provide advantages. Even today, predator avoidance remains a strong selective pressure for nocturnality. Many small mammals like rodents are active primarily at night because their major predators, hawks, eagles, and other diurnal raptors, hunt during the day. By being active at night, these rodents reduce their exposure to avian predators, trading them for nocturnal predators like owls, which, while formidable, are often less numerous and perhaps less of a constant threat. The calculus of risk and reward shapes when an animal is active, and for many prey species, the night offers the best odds of survival. Another major factor driving nocturnality is temperature regulation, particularly in hot or arid environments. Deserts can be brutally hot during the day, with surface temperatures exceeding 60 degrees Celsius in some locations. For small animals, which have a high surface area to volume ratio and thus lose and gain heat quickly, being active during the heat of the day can be physiologically challenging or even lethal. Many desert animals are nocturnal because nighttime temperatures are much more moderate, often 20 to 30 degrees Celsius cooler than daytime highs. By being active at night, desert animals avoid heat stress and reduce water loss. Water is precious in deserts, and animals that are active during hot daylight hours must expend water for evaporative cooling, panting or sweating to prevent overheating. Nocturnal activity allows desert animals to conserve water by avoiding the need for such cooling mechanisms. Additionally, the night air is often more humid than the dry desert air during the day, further reducing water loss through respiration and evaporation from the skin. Many desert rodents, like kangaroo rats, are active only at night and spend the daytime hours in burrows, where temperature and humidity are relatively stable. These burrows can be significantly cooler and more humid than the surface, providing a refuge from the harsh desert environment. The kangaroo rat's physiology is so well adapted to conserving water that it can survive without ever drinking water, obtaining all the moisture it needs from the seeds it eats and the metabolic water its body produces. But even with these adaptations, it still benefits from being active at night when conditions are less demanding. Resource partitioning is another important driver of nocturnality. In any given environment, there are only so many resources available: food, water, shelter, and there are many species competing for those resources. One way to reduce competition is through temporal niche partitioning, where species that use similar resources do so at different times. By adopting different activity patterns, species that would otherwise compete directly can coexist in the same habitat. A classic example can be seen in African carnivores. Lions are often cathemeral, active during both day and night, though they prefer to hunt at night when prey vision is poorer and when cooler temperatures make long pursuits less exhausting. Leopards are primarily nocturnal, hunting at night and spending much of the day resting in trees. Cheetahs are primarily diurnal, hunting during the day when their incredible speed gives them the best advantage in open terrain, and when their main competitors, lions and hyenas, are less active. This temporal partitioning allows all three large predators to coexist in the same African savanna ecosystems, reducing the direct competition by hunting at different times. Similar patterns occur in smaller animals. In many forests, there are guilds of mouse-like rodents that might seem ecologically similar, but close examination reveals that some species are strictly nocturnal, others are crepuscular, active mainly at dawn and dusk, and a few might be diurnal. This division of the daily cycle allows multiple species to exploit similar food resources while minimizing direct competition. The evolution of nocturnality can also be driven by the sensory ecology of prey. Some prey animals are most easily detected or captured at night. For example, many flowering plants that are pollinated by moths release their strongest scents at night, when their pollinators are active. Predators that specialize in feeding on these moths therefore benefit from being active at night when their prey is most abundant and accessible. Interestingly, the evolution of nocturnality doesn't necessarily happen all at once. Many animals are flexible in their activity patterns, shifting between diurnal and nocturnal activity depending on environmental conditions, season, or predation pressure. This flexibility might be an intermediate stage in the evolution of strict nocturnality, or it might be a stable strategy that allows animals to exploit both daytime and nighttime resources, depending on which is more profitable at any given time. The costs and benefits of nocturnality vary with body size, diet, habitat, and many other factors, which is why some groups of animals are predominantly nocturnal, while others are mostly diurnal. Birds, for example, are mostly diurnal, with relatively few species being truly nocturnal. This is likely because flight is energy intensive and requires excellent vision for navigating through complex three-dimensional environments. While vision can be enhanced for low light conditions, as we see in owls, it's generally easier to fly during the day when light is abundant. Exceptions to this pattern, nocturnal birds like nightjars, owls and kiwis have evolved specialized adaptations that make nocturnal flight or ground-based nocturnal activity feasible. In contrast, many mammal species are nocturnal or crepuscular. The sensory adaptations that evolved during the nocturnal bottleneck make mammals well suited for nighttime activity, and many mammal groups have retained or re-evolved nocturnality even in the absence of dinosaurs. Rodents, bats, many primates, most carnivores, and numerous other mammal groups include substantial numbers of nocturnal species. The diversity of nocturnal mammals suggests that nocturnality continues to be advantageous for many different reasons across different ecological contexts. The choice between day and night is one of the fundamental decisions shaped by evolution that determines an animal's place in the ecological community. It affects every aspect of an animal's biology, from its sensory systems to its metabolism, from its reproductive strategies to its interactions with other species. Understanding these patterns helps us see that the division of animals into nocturnal and diurnal isn't arbitrary, but rather reflects deep evolutionary processes that have been shaping life for hundreds of millions of years. Threats to the night. The natural night, the darkness that has shaped nocturnal animals for millions of years, is disappearing. Across much of the world, artificial light now floods the nighttime landscape, transforming what was once the domain of darkness into something else entirely. This phenomenon, called light pollution, represents one of the most pervasive but underappreciated environmental changes humans have imposed on the planet. For nocturnal animals, the consequences are profound. Light pollution takes several forms. There's sky glow, the brightening of the night sky over inhabited areas, which can be visible for hundreds of kilometers. There's glare, excessive brightness that causes visual discomfort and can temporarily blind both humans and animals. There's light trespass, light falling where it's not intended, such as streetlights illuminating natural areas. And there's clutter, confusing arrays of bright lights that overwhelm the visual field. All these forms of light pollution affect nocturnal animals, though the specific impacts vary by species. For animals that rely on darkness for camouflage or cover, artificial light eliminates that protective shield. A mouse that normally scurries across open ground under cover of darkness might become highly visible under streetlights, making it easier prey for owls or terrestrial predators. Studies have shown that many small mammals alter their foraging behavior in artificially lit areas, spending less time in the open and foraging less efficiently, which can lead to reduced food intake and poorer body condition. For nocturnal predators, light pollution can be both a blessing and a curse. Some species, particularly those that rely primarily on vision, may actually benefit from artificial lighting because it makes prey easier to spot. Owls, for instance, have been observed hunting more successfully around streetlights, where rodents are more visible. But this apparent benefit is deceptive because it disrupts the natural predator-prey balance. Prey populations may decline in artificially lit areas, and the altered activity patterns can cascade through the ecosystem in unexpected ways. For nocturnal insects, particularly those that are attracted to light, artificial illumination can be deadly. Moths, mayflies, caddisflies, and many other nocturnal insects are drawn to artificial lights, a behavior that likely evolved as a navigation strategy. These insects may have evolved to orient themselves by celestial light sources, like the moon and stars, which are effectively at infinite distance, and thus provide stable reference points for navigation. An artificial light, being much closer, creates a confusing navigational signal, and insects flying toward it spiral inward, becoming trapped in endless circuits around the light source. The result is what's sometimes called the vacuum cleaner effect, where artificial lights suck insects out of the surrounding environment. These insects may exhaust themselves flying around the lights. They may be eaten by predators that congregate near the lights, or they may be killed directly by the heat of the light fixture. Either way, populations of nocturnal insects decline in areas with significant light pollution. This has cascading effects on the species that feed on these insects, bats, birds, and others, and on the plants that depend on these insects for pollination. Sea turtles face particularly severe impacts from light pollution. Female sea turtles come ashore at night to lay their eggs on beaches, and the hatchlings that emerge weeks later instinctively navigate toward the brightest horizon, which naturally would be the moonlight reflecting off the ocean. But when beaches are lit by artificial lights from coastal development, hatchlings become disoriented and head inland toward the lights instead of toward the ocean. Thousands of hatchlings die every year from this light-induced disorientation, becoming dehydrated, being hit by vehicles, or being eaten by predators. Migratory birds are also affected by light pollution. Many bird species migrate at night, using stars for navigation. Artificial lights, especially on tall buildings and communication towers, can disorient migrating birds, causing them to become confused and exhausted. They may circle lit buildings repeatedly, sometimes colliding with the structures or with each other. In some cities, particularly during peak migration periods, hundreds or even thousands of birds may die in a single night due to collision with artificially lit structures. Beyond light pollution, nocturnal animals face numerous other threats from human activities. Habitat destruction is perhaps the most fundamental. As forests are cleared for agriculture, wetlands are drained for development, and grasslands are converted to cropland. The habitats that nocturnal animals depend on disappear. Many nocturnal species have specific habitat requirements, particular types of forests, wetlands with certain characteristics, or desert regions with appropriate vegetation. When these habitats are destroyed or fragmented, populations decline, and species can become threatened or extinct. Pesticide use also affects nocturnal animals, particularly insectivores like bats and nocturnal birds. When insects are killed by pesticides, the animals that feed on them lose their food source. Additionally, some pesticides can accumulate in predators that eat contaminated prey, leading to poisoning. Bats are particularly vulnerable because they eat large quantities of insects and can accumulate toxic levels of certain pesticides over time. Climate change is altering the nocturnal world in subtle but important ways. Changes in temperature affect when animals are active, potentially disrupting the temporal matching between predators and prey, or between pollinators and flowering plants. Changes in precipitation patterns affect where water is available, which is particularly important for nocturnal animals in arid regions that depend on scarce water sources. Shifts in vegetation zones as climates change can eliminate habitat for species adapted to particular environmental conditions. For some animals, climate change may actually be expanding nocturnality. As temperatures rise in many regions, some animals that were previously active during cooler parts of the day are shifting more of their activity to nighttime to avoid heat stress. This represents a form of behavioral thermoregulation, using temporal patterns rather than physiological mechanisms to maintain body temperature. However, these shifts can bring animals into new competitive or predatory relationships with species that were already nocturnal, potentially creating novel ecological interactions with unpredictable outcomes. Conservation efforts for nocturnal animals face unique challenges. Studying and monitoring animals that are active at night is inherently more difficult than working with diurnal species. Researchers must work at night themselves, often using specialized equipment like night vision gear thermal cameras, or acoustic monitoring devices. Educating the public about nocturnal animals is challenging because most people rarely encounter these animals and may not realize they exist or appreciate their ecological importance. However, progress is being made. Dark sky initiatives aim to reduce light pollution through better lighting design, using fully shielded fixtures that direct light downward rather than up into the sky, using motion sensors so lights are only on when needed, and educating communities about the impacts of light pollution. These efforts benefit not only wildlife, but also humans, who benefit from being able to see stars and experience natural darkness, something that is increasingly rare in our artificially lit world. Protected areas and wildlife corridors that include provisions for maintaining natural darkness are being established. Some parks and reserves have dark sky designations and enforce strict limits on artificial lighting. These protected areas serve as refuges for nocturnal animals and as living laboratories where scientists can study nocturnal ecosystems with minimal human interference. As we work to understand and protect nocturnal animals, we're learning that darkness itself is a resource that must be conserved. Just as we recognize the importance of clean air, clean water, and intact habitats, we must recognize the importance of natural darkness for the countless species that depend on it. The night is not an empty time waiting to be filled with human activity and artificial light. It's a thriving ecosystem in its own right, home to animals whose remarkable adaptations allow them to thrive in conditions that would leave humans helpless. Protecting these animals means protecting the darkness they need to survive. Conclusion. As dawn approaches and the first hints of light appear on the eastern horizon, the nocturnal world begins its daily retreat. Owls return to their roosts, bats head back to their caves and trees, nocturnal rodents scurry to their burrows, and the creatures of darkness cede the stage to the diurnal animals that will rule the daylight hours. The transition happens gradually but inexorably, guided by the ancient rhythms of light and dark that have shaped life on Earth since its beginning. What we've explored tonight is just a glimpse into the secret lives of nocturnal animals. We've seen how vision can be adapted to work in near total darkness, how sound can become as useful as sight for navigation and hunting, how bioluminescence turns bodies into living signals in the night, and how touch can reveal the world when eyes cannot. We've explored the strategies predators use to hunt in darkness, and the equally sophisticated defenses prey have evolved to survive. We've encountered behaviors so strange they challenge our understanding of why animals do what they do. And we've considered the evolutionary pressures that drive some species to abandon the day and embrace the night. These adaptations, remarkable as they are individually, become even more impressive when we consider them as parts of complete sensory and behavioral systems. A barn owl doesn't just have good hearing or good vision. It has both, integrated seamlessly with silent flight, sharp talons, and hunting strategies that make it one of nature's most effective predators. A bat doesn't just have echolocation. It combines that acoustic sense with agile flight, sophisticated neural processing, and behavioral flexibility that allows it to hunt everything from tiny gnats to large insects, and even, in some species, small vertebrates or fruit. The nocturnal world reminds us that our own perception of reality is just one of countless ways of experiencing the world. We see